It's fall here in Michigan, and it's time to put my strawberries to bed. And you're probably wondering what I mean by that. Well, as we get into the colder weather, where the temperatures are going up and down, the soil freezes and thaws, especially if it has a high clay content. And as that soil freezes and thaws, the water expands, and with strawberries, 90% of the roots are in the top 6 inches of the soil. So if you have the soil expanding in contraction, it breaks roots. So what we have to do is cover those strawberries over, and it protects that freezing and thawing cycle so that you don't have as much expansion and contraction of the soil, which thereby doesn't break the roots, which allows the strawberries to grow more vigorously in the spring. And I have tried it both ways, and I have noticed the strawberries are smaller and weaker when they haven't been covered. The time to cover strawberries is when the temperature has dropped below 20 degrees, which is usually around Thanksgiving around here. But in some warm falls, the growth will still be quite vigorous. It's not growing real fast, but the leaves are still straight up, and they are going through the process of photosynthesis, even though it's really slowly. But once it gets cold enough, those leaves will drop flat to the ground, and that's the indicator that it's time for you to put the straw on. When selecting the straw, you want to be sure that that straw is fairly clean. In other words, you don't see a lot of seed heads in it, and you don't see a lot of weeds baled in with it. That way you can avoid some problems in the spring. And when you put that straw on, you want to put it at a depth of about 4 to 6 inches. And it will settle down, and it will cut down on that expansion and contraction of the soil. Now, if you put the mulch on too deeply, for instance, if you were putting on 12 inches or 14 inches of straw, what it'll essentially do is smother the plants. And at the end of the winter, when they would normally start to grow, it'll be so dark under there that the plants will die because the crowns are exhausted in terms of their stored photosynthates or the sugars. And as soon as the sun starts to shine and it starts to warm up a little bit, the plants start to come out of dormancy. So that's the time when we would pull the straw back and allow the plants to start to grow. Now, that might be early enough to where we might still have a frost, and you can put the straw back up against the plants to give them a little extra protection. But if you have very deep straw, like 12 inches, and you don't get out there right away, you can come out and pull the straw back and all your plants are dead. So 4 to 6 inches is about what we're looking for. Now, after we've removed all of the dead leaves, and one of the reasons we remove the dead leaves is because those leaves will have some diseases on them, and it's good to cut those off, trying not to cut the crown, so I don't suggest you use like a weed whip to do this. If you cut the crown, you're really defeating your purpose. But you cut them off with some shears, and then what I like to do is I will just rake them into a hole that I've dug in the garden. Now, there are a number of benefits for that. One, I dig that hole about 12 to 14 inches at least, which is below the tilling depth. And so those leaves aren't going to come back up to the surface, and they will not be able to cause disease for the plants. When we have leftover organic matter, for instance, when we don't harvest all of our apples, many times we dump them into the garden, and then we dig the holes and just rake all that material into the garden, into the hole. And the reason we do that is because it puts organic matter deeper in the soil. The worms will move in and break it down, and it really makes it nice for the plants. And you can see a noticeable difference when you bury a lot of organic matter in your garden. And the reason I bury it is because it can attract other things that you don't necessarily want around. For instance, rats can come in and start feeding on organic matter like apples or food waste that you might dump in the garden. And squirrels, chipmunks, although those aren't as much of a problem. And if you don't have a fence around your garden, and even though I have about a 6-foot fence, deer can leap that easily, and they love to eat apples. I see them in my orchard all the time with some of the drops. So I put that material in there, it breaks down in the soil. Digging the hole will loosen up the soil, which helps the roots to penetrate in the future. And in addition to that, that organic matter acts as a sponge, so it helps to hold water down deeper, so plants are able to withstand drought more easily. It adds some nutrients to the soil, but you wouldn't consider it a fertilizer. It's a soil amendment. And also, in the process of digging the hole, I am burning up calories, which is a good thing. So there are no downsides to putting the organic matter back in the garden. So those are the things that I like to do this time of year. And let's move on to pruning and some of the other things that have to be done outside. We happen to be having a fairly good winter. not very much snow on the ground. We had one storm earlier in the year, and I've been able to work outside quite a bit. So gardening season's not over. I can get ready for things for next spring. So I'll see you a little bit later.